much of our life is lived on autopilot. Reactions we don't choose, habits we don't remember forming, patterns we swear we have outgrown, and yet they keep returning. Today, we're decoding what's really happening beneath the surface, where the conscious mind meets the subconscious and real change quietly begins. Welcome to Divine Decode, where we explore the deeper meaning behind our inner experiences and bring language to what's often felt but rarely understood. I'm Saima, and I'm joined by our illuminating guest, Anna Machkalov, certified hypnotherapist and former cosmetic medicine professional with over 23 years of experience working with the mind body connection. Her work bridges science, consciousness, and real life transformation through subconscious healing. So, today we are unpacking the conscious and subconscious mind, how habits are formed, and why lasting change begins beneath awareness. So, Anna, welcome to the show.
Hello, Saima. It is my absolute pleasure to be here.
You're warmly welcome, Anna. It's my honor to have you here. So, Anna, when someone first comes to you feeling stuck or frustrated with themselves, what do you notice is usually misunderstood about how their own mind works?
So I like to take things back to the basics. People come to me and they often think something is wrong with them. They often think, because they can't change a behavior, or they have some limiting belief or about themselves or a particular situation. They think immediately that's what is wrong with me? Why can't I change this? And so on. So as to take it and distill it back to the basics, if I can ask you to even, imagine in your eyes, imagine a circle. Imagine this circle is a blank circle, and imagine this blank circle is every human being as we're born. We're born as a blank slate. Okay, so this blank slate, as every human being is born, has no information. The only thing we're born with is what we call the primitive mind. And the primitive mind is what holds our fight flight reflex, fight or flight, freeze and fawn also. But those are the only things that a human being is born with. From about 0 until 8, 9 years old, we start developing our programming, our subconscious mind. And usually, our primary caregiver, our mothers, are usually the ones that start implanting that. They start saying, this is a dog, this is a cat, this is, you eat chocolate cake on a birthday, you like it now, that's already imprinted. You don't ask questions because the reasoning, the logic, the willpower, all of that doesn't come on board until later. And this is the reason, Saima, that we say kids are sponges. Everything we take in, we just absorb. We simply absorb it. Then about 8, 9 years old, we start developing a filter, so to speak. We start developing the critical mind. We start developing this filter between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And that conscious mind that starts coming on board after about 8, 9 years old is what is essentially the prefrontal cortex. Is what holds our reasoning, decision making, our willpower, our logic. All of those things are stored in that conscious mind. Here's the whopper. The conscious mind power. So you have a decision to make. You decide you want to change a certain limiting belief or a behavior. That conscious mind is only 12%. The subconscious programming is a whopping 88. So when you're talking about the simple math, if you look at it and you imagine that circle in your mind and you look at, wow, 88% I'm operating out of programming, out of what is on autopilot, if you can use those words. And then the 12% is my logic, my reasoning, my willpower. So this is why you can't just say to any human being, try harder, because, I can try as hard as I humanly possibly can, but that try harder will be still 12 as opposed to 88%. So this is why we're always fighting an uphill battle unless we work with the subconscious programming. And that's where my work comes in. We work with the behaviors, we work with that programming as opposed to just the logical desire to change the behavior or the logical desire to start, exercising more or stop eating chocolate at 12 midnight, whatever the case may be.
Yes, and the way you break that down is incredibly reassuring. By naming the primitive mind alongside the conscious, logical one, you remove so much unnecessary self bullying you might feel. And it helps people see that feeling stuck isn't a personal failure, It's often the result of trying to force change with willpower alone, while another part of the mind is still focused on safety and survival. And that distinction brings a lot of compassion into the conversation. Now, I'm
Absolutely.
curious that, mhm, many people out there believe that awareness alone should be enough to change a habit. So, why doesn't the conscious mind always have the power we expect it to?
Well, I'll put it to you very simply, to simplify again, because I love simplicity. I love distilling, and I'll put it to you this way: the brain wants to go back to what it knows. The brain likes the course of least resistance, and the brain, as the body, has the thing called homeostasis. And so, as much and homeostasis, just to break it down, is basically balance. It's basically to come back to whatever the equilibrium. Also known as, you know, whatever it's been, also known as a habit, also known as the way you've always been behaving. So to say to a person, just change, your conscious desire should be enough to change a behavior is not a fair concept because the body is designed to work against that thought. The body is designed to keep you in equilibrium, keep you in the known associations. Because again, as you said, the brain's job is not to keep you happy or change your behaviors or get you to do whatever it is you want to do. The brain's job is simply to keep you safe. And so when you think of it in those terms, safety means, again, if you distill it back to when a human being first started walking this planet, if you think about what the subconscious mind operates in, it's not good or bad. It's known or unknown. If it's a known, it's good. If it's an unknown, even if it's the best thing for you and you want it and you consciously want to change it, if it's an unknown, the subconscious views it as a potential threat, a potential danger, a potential hard work, a potential going out of that cave, and the berry you pick is an unknown berry and it could be poisonous. And so evolution has basically got our brain to say, okay, this is an unknown, it's potentially negative, and because it's not the course of least resistance, and because this requires the work, the brain simply doesn't want to do that. It's efficient, and the efficiency is least course of least resistance, no work.
Mhm. That's such an important reframe, Anna. When you explain it that way, it really becomes clear that resistance isn't, sabotage, it's protection. And the brain returning to what it knows, like you said, I feel it isn't laziness or lack of commitment. It's the nervous system doing its job, to keep us safe in familiar territory. Absolutely, I agree with that. Even when that territory no longer serves us. And hearing this really softens the way people relate to themselves during change. So, now, building on that, how does understanding the role of the subconscious shift the way people approach self change?
I think once you understand anything, it's like turning on the light in the closet and the pair of pants is no longer a monster. Once you can shine the light on something, it gives it a different perspective and it makes it more manageable. It makes it more palatable. Once you can understand it, it gives you a different perspective to deal with it. However, I also like to say that a lot of times it can be something as simple as laziness because again, laziness is a byproduct of whatever reason you're lazy, right? That you're not just lazy for just because you're born lazy. Lazy has become a habit that you have picked up for whatever reason, for whatever and whatever that secondary gain is. What is that secondary gain? If I don't do something, somebody else will do it. If I don't do something, maybe I won't risk the risk that comes along with it. There's the risk of failure, risk of success, fears, those fears. So there's many reasons why somebody could be lazy in itself. And it's not necessarily just but again, it all boils down to when you distill it back down to the basics. What is the reason? And the mind is trying to keep you safe. So, yes, if you take it back to, I'm lazy because, I don't want to, uh, I'm afraid that if I do this and this, there might be potential of me getting hurt. That's what we work with that fear of that fear of getting hurt, that behavior of lazy, that's what we work with.
What you're naming this, they, really changes the emotional tone of self work actually, when laziness is, no longer treated as a character flaw, but as a strategy with a history. It invites I feel that it invites curiosity instead of self judgment, and shining light on those patterns gives people permission to ask why instead of immediately trying to force change. And that shift alone can be deeply relieving. And the way you explain that is really remarkable. Now, let's stay with the subconscious for a moment. So, how are habits and emotional responses usually formed there in the first place?
So, they're formed there by repetition, really. So, essentially, what is a habit? It is a behavior, if you can think of, sticky tape or Velcro or something like that. It's a behavior that imprinted itself on the nervous system, on those neural pathways in the brain. How does that happen? Either you're in fight or flight. So, you could be in fight or flight, just being in a nervous situation, or you could be in some kind, somebody scared you and put it in, and you heard something and that came into the mind. It could be, it could be so many reasons why you took in a certain behavior, a certain idea, a certain whatever it is. Once it's implanted and those neural pathways are connected, it becomes a habit. But the beautiful thing is that anything that becomes a habit, if it's learned, it means it could be unlearned. We just have to instill a new habit for those neural pathways to have somewhere to go. If that makes sense to you. Neural pathways in the brain, that neuroplasticity that, we have found that just because you have made a habit, just because you have done something a certain way, people like to resort to, well, that's just the way I've always been. That may be, but it doesn't mean that's the way you always have to be. So if once those neural pathways, we say, you know, neural pathways that fire together will wire together. Once we refire them in a different direction, once we make something a repetition in hypnosis, in other ways, just different modalities, but once we get you to make that behavior more of a constant, more of a repetition, and those neural pathways reconnect, then that becomes a new known. That becomes a new known, and you don't no longer need to give it any thought. It just becomes the way you do things.
Mm-hmm. That distinction is so empowering, Anna, especially the reminder that repetition work both ways. If habits are learned through repetition, it means they're not fixed identities. Like I said, they're conditioned responses. And there's a lot of hope in that because it reframes changes as a process of relearning rather than self-correction or force. Now, so what tends to happen when these patterns remain unconscious for years?
So many things. I mean, it's interesting. What can happen would be, I guess, dependent on the person's life and how it manifests, because, how anxiety manifests in my life may be different than anxiety manifests in yours. How laziness manifests in my life and what it does to me may be different to the next person. So I think everything that we have, every behavior that we have, when you think of it in the context of self protection and you think of it in the context of the brain, is simply doing a repeated pattern, a repeated behavior, because it's what it knows in order to keep you safe. And if you can separate out, safety is not happiness. It just because you want something doesn't mean that your subconscious mind is on board yet. And so once we start working with that subconscious mind and we start introducing new ways of acting, then that subconscious mind has something else to latch onto. And then it becomes a new known association. I think I answered your question. I might have gone off on a tangent, but I think I answered your question, what you were asking me.
Yes, absolutely. And what you're pointing really to really ties everything together, when we begin to see behaviors through the lens of the brain rather than morality or personality, it changes the entire conversation, Anna. Patterns don't just sit quietly in the background. They shape how we react, decide, and relate often without realizing it. And the moment we start working with the brain instead of against it, I feel that new ways of acting actually become possible, and that's when change stops feeling like efforts and starts feeling like understanding, right?
Absolutely. It's when you stop pushing and pulling and you allow. It's when you allow, when you work with it, when you allow, when you start speaking the same language of the subconscious, when it's like if I spoke to you in a different language right now, Saima, you're not going to understand it. But if I spoke to you in the language that you speak, then you're going to understand it. So it's the same thing. Once you learn to work with something, it's that beautiful saying of, don't avoid the storm, learn how to surf, or something to that effect. It's not about avoiding the mind. It's not about getting nervous and scared of whatever it is that you're feeling. It's about understanding that the power is really within us to change, the power to control ourselves, the power to, even things like, I have some clients that come to me with physical manifestations. I have one client who has a stomach pain, and this stomach pain that's on the left side, he's gone to every doctor, every test, every CT scan, everything, and it's still there, and we've been working on working with that pain. And a lot of times our bodies, if we don't express what that subconscious mind is trying to tell us, what those triggers are, if we don't pay attention to that, our bodies will express it. Our bodies will let us know whether it's in a pain in the shoulders, in the stomach, in the back, in the hands, in the whatever it is. Your throat will start to hurt, your shoulders, things will let you know you're not addressing an emotional need. And that's why that is so important, that subconscious, it may be speaking in a different language, but it's definitely trying to tell you something. And to ignore it would be like ignoring a smoke alarm in the house, just because it's annoying and it's loud.
That really makes a lot of sense, Anna, and that's remarkable, I would say. Now, in everyday life, how do subconscious habits show up in ways people often don't recognize, especially in relationships or self confidence?
Oh my goodness. I think it's everything. I mean, really, it's everything because when you think about it, Seima, 90% of what we do, 90% literally of what we do, over I think 90% is from the subconscious mind. From the moment that we wake up in the day, it's not only in relationships or in confidence, it's literally in everything we do. From the moment we wake up, we're brushing our teeth, we're putting on our clothes, we're brushing our hair, washing, everything is from the subconscious mind. That's why I say that it's 88%, which is a good thing because if it wasn't, you would have to relearn how to tie your shoes and how to brush your hair. And the brain is designed again for efficiency, for survival. The brain is designed to make it very, very easy for you. And because we as human beings have evolved to want happiness, to all these beautiful things that life has to offer, we have now the frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex that has all of these desires. And though that's it's not about, you know, looking at the subconscious mind as this forest that is dark and scary, it's about understanding that that subconscious mind is actually there, like I said, to protect you. It's there designed to really keep you on autopilot in a lot of ways. So when you ask how it affects your daily life, it's pretty much everything except for and when you have that burst of imagination, burst of, creativity or logic or willpower that you want to change something. That's that conscious mind.
Mm-hmm. That perspective really cuts through a lot of self-blame, Anna. Then, when you say everything comes from the subconscious, it reflects how people understand their reactions, their confidence, and even their relationship dynamics. Instead of labeling themselves as, this is just how I am, it opens the door to seeing those patterns as learned responses that can be understood and softened. And there's something very liberating in that lens. So, are these signs that gently point to subconscious influence rather than personality flaws?
I guess that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, that might be a matter of perspective. I think everything to some person, it could be a flaw, and another person, if you use it to your advantage, could be something that is going to be a driving force. Behavior is interesting in that sense. So just to the same, to a different person, a drive, hyper drive could be something that drives them to get things in their lives. And to another person, it could be a hyper vigilance that basically keeps them awake at night. So, and then they have to come and deal with that. So I think this is the beauty of this work is that it's not this like stamp of this is good for this, not good for that. It's really because a human being has so many facets. We have so many layers and we're so nuanced as a being, as a creature, as an organism. The mind is really, really complex. And so it you think, I have clients coming in for as a general, let's say anxiety, generalized anxiety, but then we realize that it's actually let's say a mistrust of the husband that they don't want to leave at home when they leave or something, and something and it's a trust issue or it's that dates back to whatever, I'm just giving you as a hypothetical example from one of my random people, so it could be so many different things and I think that because human behavior is mostly from the subconscious, everything comes back to that.
Mm, that makes sense. That really makes sense. And I really love how you name that. The moment behavior becomes interesting rather than, judged is often where real change begins. And acknowledging, like I said, that how complex and individual the mind it is gives people permission to be curious instead of critical. And that curiosity is often the first step toward deeper awareness and healing. Now, for listeners, yes, absolutely. For listeners who feel drawn to explore subconscious healing or your work further, where can they find you?
My website, annamachhypnosis.com. My Instagram would be great. I post a lot of the things that I do as this whole world does these days on social media, Instagram, and I think you'll be able to post the link hopefully in the show notes as well. But my Instagram and my website would be the best way. You can contact me there. You can email me directly and set up an appointment. I do always I'm happy to speak to clients for do a really quick consultation call to see if this is something that's warranted for you or if, you know, there's any contraindication. But, I would love to chat with anybody that's interested in this work.
That's noteworthy. So, thank you for joining us on Divine Decode with Saima. And if today's conversation brought clarity or even curiosity, trust that is the beginning of deeper self understanding. Until next time, stay open to what your inner world is ready to reveal.